Maybe one of you has a question to the other to begin with. Or do I confront you right away? I always want to have someone else ask a question or give the opportunity, but some people find that too brusque or confrontational. Maybe there is somebody who has an immediate, urgent question. Come on, there's a lot of drone people in here. Well, the one question that has been on my mind for quite a long time as a curator, as a cultural organizer, as somebody who's supportive of your work and of this kind of work. It's how can we make that more public, and how can we make that, how can we communicate better what the role of artists can be in this public discussion? How visible are you yourselves beyond the realms of academia and the art world?
Maybe I'll just jump in, because I think something that would be interesting for people to know would be in a conversation that I had with a lawyer, Michael Svard, with whom we worked on many, many different legal investigations. He made this very provocative claim to me, because artists are providing lawyers with new legal tools. And I'm going, what do you mean by that? Because I think most artists would be surprised to hear that what they're doing is actually legally kind of useful. And he goes, no. He said the law is this very murky, kind of abstract domain, quite ponderous. He goes, like, the ability of someone to bring a certain kind of like clarity through the production, in particular of images, narration, etc., has really helped him make a set of kind of legal moves, and to generate, in particular, kind of public awareness. So as a human rights lawyer and as an activist lawyer, for him, he says, I never go to court until I've actually, the issue has been fully kind of talked about within the kind of public domain. And in order to do that, because the law is one of the most difficult things to represent beyond language, he said artists have, and by artists, of course, he meant the ability to kind of visualize, to narrate, to tell a story. He was able to sort of use those strategies in public advocacy kind of context. So that would be one way to also sort of begin to answer that question.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you mean to sort of, in a way, provoke us to speak through our own practice about how we try to sort of get out of the academic and art context.
Not at all. I'm looking for help.
Yeah. No, actually, it's interesting because I was myself rather unexpectedly and in quite an unqualified way called as an expert witness based on a project I had been doing around the accent tests that asylum seekers are subject to. So when asylum seekers come to the country, many of them are put, if they don't have other forms of documentation, or if their documentation is supposedly suspicious, they're given an accent test to see if their accent corroborates with their place of origin. So I did several projects on this, and I learned a lot about the ways in which these companies were working and they were hired. And what that meant was that I was then asked to present in the asylum tribunal in the United Kingdom. But then the one thing I was asked not to say by the lawyer, and the one thing I didn't want to say, in fact, was that I'm an artist. Because, of course, it sounded really strange. First, they have to understand, why is this artist in this room? And who asked him here? And what the hell is he talking about? So then I had to use a bit of taqiyya and say, like, I'm a PhD, whatever. Anyway, so the point being that in that context, it wasn't right to be an artist. It didn't help the guy's case in any way. And there's also, when you enter those spaces, and maybe this is why it's nice to remain a little bit in these other contexts, is because you are immediately in a zone of compromise where things that cannot be heard are made very clear to you. So, for example, in that context, I can't say that I find it wholly abhorrent that you're doing this accent test and that they mean nothing, which is what I believe. And on top of that, I don't believe in borders. So, like, you do this whole thing. You have to play the game with him and say, with a little bit of management, with this alterations, this thing, then it can function. Because if you are constructed as a radical or someone who is thinks in a way that is kind of outside of, let's say, the conventions, which is also what the kind of artist question would be doing in that context, then you can't speak to these kind of forms of truth production. And I think, so it's a complicated, it's a double question that you're asking, because it's also like, how can we enter these forums, but also how do we make sure that we're heard in a way that makes any sense, that is not just a form of compromise. Yeah.
Are you looking at me? I mean, I certainly wouldn't claim, well, I mean, I'm not sure about artists' work needing to be seen. I don't know. I mean, I think there are artists who are more engaged in a way where you can see a direct result like you're describing. I don't know, somebody like Michael Recovitz doing his Enemy Kitchen, or, you know, serving food on the plates that came from one of Saddam's palaces, or, you know, reinvigorating date importation from Iraq after the 2003 war. You know, I think we could probably point to many artists who function in lots of different contexts outside of the art world. I'm not sure it is a problem that I'm not sure we're not seen. I think, if anything, the fact that we're kind of, like you say, seen as slightly unreliable or eccentric can sometimes be a good thing, you know, rather than being seen as part of the establishment. I don't know.
There is a question in the room, and a microphone coming.
This is probably direct mainly towards Lawrence and Susan, but all three of you, thank you, fascinating talk. You both touched on the nature of truth and the nature of algorithmic interpretation of activity. I just wonder what you thought about truth in the mind of a machine versus truth in the mind of a human, as an idea that's difficult to get your head around. We often believe machines and believe the output of machines and algorithms as being the truth, but they're making decisions for us that are perhaps unexpected.
Sorry, what can you? I didn't quite hear the example.
The idea that algorithms are being much louder. Sorry, that algorithms are being used to make decisions that we consider to be truthful. The drone is making a decision to strike that house. Yeah. The algorithm is deciding whether you're a suspect character based on your name and the word you use. They're considered to be a truthful statement in society in the kind of overriding narrative, but they're being made by machines. I just wonder what your thoughts on that were.
I mean, one of the things that's very interesting to me is this dilemma between moral responsibility and legal liability. And I've done quite a lot of work now looking at the ways in which algorithms, the way that they actually work, and but maybe I would just a simple example would be, it's illegal in the UK to use race-based indicators to assess financial credit scores, for example. But when you apply for a credit card or for a loan, algorithms can actually aggregate data that human financial officers would be off limits. So they start to aggregate things like places where people live, neighborhoods, spelling of names, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a way in which algorithms can actually, you could say, slither through the juridical shallows and actually start to aggregate data that would be ethically off limits to their sort of human kind of counterpoint. So I think, I mean, I'm probably not sort of answering your question, except to say that there's this algorithmic kind of reason is produced by, what would I want to say? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I apologize for that. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion now within the context of, say, conflict and war. A lot of accidents actually happen through soldier fatigue, stress, depression, blah, blah, blah. So there's been lots of arguments around what they call that machines are moral predators in that they don't make mistakes based on their kind of their fatigue at a certain moment or their kind of anxiety or crisis, et cetera, that the more automated warfare becomes, the more decision-making will actually operate according to a kind of moral kind of register. I mean, so there's just as much kind of like much writing going on that is actually trying to push for automation. And certainly, obviously, economic kind of factors are kind of key in all of that. But the idea that, and this is the thing, sorry, I've been babbling a little bit, but I would argue that the Obama regime has specifically believed that that one can outcompute kind of terrorism, and Obama has an enormous conviction in the capacity of predictive software, and it was very clear in all of his election campaigns and his return to kind of election. He has enormous faith in the power of data to actually produce some sort of kind of truth claims upon which a certain set of actions can take place.
So actually the technology is more reliable than the human operator.
And that I would
according
say
to-
in many
yeah.
cases that it's actually true,
Yeah.
or that is in fact the case. It
But-
could be proven to be the case, yeah.
But then there's the people who write these codes and these algorithms and what the decisions they made. So I think it's wrong
how
to
data's
assume that it's a pure pure machinic decision. It's just a kind of more refined human position. To give an example, I was looking into this lie detector. Maybe some of you know about it. It's called LVA 6.50, layered voice analysis. And it looks at the way, what it supposedly does is it looks at the micro fluctuations of the vocal cords while people are speaking to assess whether or not they're stressed, or it has a whole series of verdicts like stress, lie, embarrass, all these kind of things. So it supposedly can determine all these different things in this sort of sound of the voice. And so again, yeah, it's this kind of conflict, like I was saying, between this sort of saying and the said. But here, of course, there's somebody who says that this is what embarrassment sounds like. There's a kind of database of, and I can't believe that I don't know what embarrassment sounds like. I think I might have an idea, but it's not, of course, the same as everyone else's. So again, it's kind of comes back down to a kind of rudimentary human decision about what is embarrassment or what is a lie. So yeah, although the machine makes the decision, its original coding is, of course,
No,
people.
but this is where I would disagree, because algorithms actually learn from themselves. So we're not talking about, I'm going to write a software program and then execute it. We're talking about the innate ability of algorithms to self-educate based on an ever-expanding kind of data set. So I think it's a little bit more complicated. At some point, there is a human actor in all of this, but
Yeah.
it's not simply human input, algorithmic output.
But yeah, it begins with a kind of, it's like the first chat is hello, hello. It's like two people. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm slightly surprised, though. I'm slightly surprised to hear you talk about the notion of truth anyway. I mean, I think that's such a problematic idea, and it's very interesting to see how you're dealing with, both of you are dealing very differently with the idea of the first-person account, or, the witness statement, or the document relating to a real event, like the posting of the video that you start off with. Like you're saying, it's so mediated, it's so tightly edited, it's so difficult to make an assessment about what's gone on, what's happened, what's been said, what the consequences of that are. It's not so, to me, it's not so interesting what the truth is.
No. But
Well, it's truth claims get acted upon in the world. I think this is where we have to pay attention to the question of truth. Claims are made upon which a whole set of actions occur, and
Yeah.
this is why we have to take their claims seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
There are two paradoxes of visibility I've been struggling with, and one is what has been happening in Ferguson, where policemen are, I'm looking at Nathan, are they now forced to wear cameras, or the discussion is about to mount them with cameras, and at the same time, so we can go through the material and see if they acted correctly, but at the same time that's a kind of extended surveillance of the situation, because they become like a distributed surveillance system. And they are wearing LEDs and maybe all kinds of other gear to prevent being filmed. It's kind of white out people filming them. So there's kind of tension of visibility and invisibility, and that's there. And then the other one that's just horrifying is with ISIS, where they have perfected the meme of this horrific act, and that has to be shared to be seen to have this impact. And at the same time, they want to remain untraceable or unrecognizable themselves. How do you look at these situations unfolding as visual sensitive people that you are? Because I've been having a very fascinating conversation about this. I mean, fascination, but with Daniel of Methaven, who will be on afterwards, that it is, and there was a Guardian article about this today, it is kind of the middle-aged barbarism with 21st century state-of-the-art high-tech media intelligence that's happening with ISIS. Have you followed this?
I mean, I've been following it again because of the voice of the guy of Jihad John, which is much speculation. And of course, all the right-wing newspapers came out that it was this guy, I can't remember his name now, but but he had his perfect, all these a cappella recordings of him, but it's turned out it's not him, right? I mean, more or less. So it's kind of interesting because, of course, they would have hoped for, they couldn't have wished for a better voice sample than somebody singing a cappella, and posting hundreds of their voice on YouTube. So his voice print was kind of given, and then given again in another context.
Allegedly, Jihadi John is a rapper from London, and is all over YouTube.
But you're saying it's not him.
Well, apparently it's not him, because I think the jump to him was, of course, the sort of the perfect data set that he provided in his kind of a cappella thing. But I can't remember why. That's leading off somewhere away from what you were talking about. So.
I mean, there was a discussion yesterday on on Channel 4, and it was like, it's a difficult one because someone was saying, well, yes, it's an act of 21st century barbarism, but he goes, well, what do you call dropping 2 atomic bombs over Japan when they were
or the death sentence,
or the use of, I mean, very quickly one can start to find all kinds of examples where horrific acts of violence have been perpetrated, and we could say, well, what would be the kind of, with a kind of questionable political kind of agenda. So it's.
But specifically referring to the visibility of it and the visual.
The distribution of
the
the
distribution of it and the
I see.
the mimification or the.
Why is that different from American soldiers photographing themselves torturing Iraqis in Abu Ghraib? I mean, to me, it's not that different. I know you're saying that they're distributing it because it's propaganda, but then they're in it's a war. It is a propaganda war. I'm not sure that it's so easy to distinguish these particular acts as something specially horrific.
Well, there were certain kind of 2 camera angles, the lapel microphone, the editing.
So we're offended by their sophistication in terms of the production value. I mean, I don't understand what the critique is. If it's about the, I'm kind of confused why
it's the amazement how they distribute their information. That's what I mean.
I was at a lecture, actually quite a few years ago at Tate Britain, where Boris Groys was talking, and he said, oh, Obama, oh, you're not Obama, oh my God, what a flip. He was talking Osama bin Laden.
Was that Boris Groys' mistake or your mistake?
He said, he was calling Osama bin Laden a video artist for the ways in which he had understood the medium, set himself up, used a distribution sort of system.
So maybe it's almost like video art in that sense. That's what I mean.
But why is it different from the Twin Towers attack? I mean, that's, to me, it's all part of the same. It's not, I don't see it as something new. It's not a new shift. I mean, the attack on the Twin Towers was a cinematic moment, It's like that's why it was designed to be done in that way. That's, so it's, I'm not sure it's a new strategy.
One thing that was interesting, can I just ask?
Yeah.
And
somebody
sorry,
was waving
yeah,
at
yeah.
me, and a lot of
Sorry.
people are waving here because we are over
Okay,
time.
okay,
but-
well, that's fine. No, because I was just going to say, I heard that you could be prosecuted in the UK if you actually watched any of those videos.
Really?
That's good. Another reason not to watch those videos.
There's a question from the room.
At the back as well. Yeah, over here. You can run the microphone out.
Yeah, I just wanted to address briefly the comment that you made about algorithms being inherently self-correcting. That is not true of the way data-driven learning systems actually work. They do retain the structural biases that are built into those systems. So we don't actually see these things correct out. They will continue to perpetuate the worldview of the system that makes them. Now, if you have new information coming in and there's a human in the loop and you see things emerging from the data and then you change the structures, that happens. But the system does not do that of itself. There is no intelligence in the system.
Can I just add a comment to that? Because algorithms essentially don't kind of exist without context. They work in a truth-false scenario, but it depends on what data sets you feed in, the business model that creates a company that feeds in the data set, number of things. You still do have prejudices and you have their own points to that. But I want to make a comment quickly about the use and the outsourcing of security systems to independent companies by corporations, where they have a very different idea of collecting information. So you have a lot of private security firms who are fully entitled, because they have no accountability, to have laser cameras and to have high-quality image software and hardware. So they exist in a completely different realm to the police. So how do we then use those ephemeral, or not ephemeral images in this case, like as artists? But I'm not sure how much time we have to discuss that.
No, I mean, yes, I agree, and I understand. The point I was sort of trying to make was simply that there isn't a kind of this sense of authorship is so radically distributed when we're talking about these kinds of domains of algorithmic reason, that they're continually pumping all kinds of new data in that is being used to run new kind of parameters, et cetera. So the learning is a learning of a kind of computational set of filtering based on changing kind of parameters within that arena of calculation. There's lots and lots of human input that goes in, but nonetheless, we're talking about like aggregating sets of data that are just like far beyond our capacity to actually understand in terms of the sheer kind of volume of information. And that's the way the system is sort of self-educating, is through this kind of continual analysis of new data that's being input into the system and recalibrating in the way that, say, Norbert Wiener might have talked about in terms of feedback loops, is more what I was sort of trying to gesture towards.
We have one more last question, and then it's time for the break. Daniel.
Hi. I want to come back to the way that we talked about ISIS, because I think that our discussion about it should be made a little bit more precise. I think that, first of all, 9/11, no doubt, was absolutely a cinematic, orchestrated attack, but it was one that was preceding the sort of social media age. So it was designed to be forwarded, partially, largely. It was one to be filmed and distributed over mainstream media. I remember that, because you couldn't watch the thing on the internet because the internet didn't have enough bandwidth. So you had to go to a bar or something to sort of watch TV, right? And with ISIS, we can see, I think, that the way that the means of production have shifted is that, let's say, the means of production of the actual acts are sort of full HD, and are that in a way that Bin Laden, though he had a keen awareness of how he should appear very threatening, he always appeared in a cave, or sitting in some background, so you couldn't make out where he was. Whereas the ISIS video had this sort of scenery to it, and the two camera standpoints, that you feel that that so much of the impact of the thing is in the resolution of its sort of documentation, orchestration, whatever. And I think that the amazing work that you do, Susan, is you're visualizing a violence that is so systemic that there is no image for it. And I think ISIS knows that, and it produces, like, into the fullest resolution, a kind of, killing of an individual. And that produces the kind of question that you also asked, like, what is this versus, like, a drone strike or, like, a kind of collateral murder, where you do actually kill those people by the dozens, basically. But we also know that ISIS has an app called Dawn, which allows the users to, they open up their Twitter accounts to just redistribute ISIS tweets among your other tweets. So there's all kinds of ways that ISIS takes control of forms of publicity that weren't available to Al-Qaeda, in a sense. And that's indeed new. Sorry for length.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Thank you.
I think at least Phil and Fiona will be really angry with me if we keep on. And let's go outside to the bar and come back in half an hour with our final 2 presentations. There will 20 minutes. We won't have a. Sorry. Thank you, Lauren.